All right, I'm recording. Welcome. Thanks for joining. I'm Melissa, and I manage outreach for HCDE. Thank you so much for coming. This is the last in our series of professional events. And they've been really great. And we've gotten great comments, and maybe we'll do it again next winter. Today, we're going to be talking about getting the offer, sort of what happens after you get the offer. How do you negotiate? How do you prepare for the next step? And we have a wonderful panel here. We have Gail and Jamie and Karen, and I'll let all of you introduce yourselves real quick. Gail, do you want to take it away? And then we can go to Karen and Jamie.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Melissa. My name is Gail Cornelius. I use the she, her pronouns. I'm the director of the Career Center for the College of Engineering here at the University of Washington.
Thanks.
Karen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Neff, and I also use the her and she pronouns. I'm the director of recruiting here at WISE. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. And Jamie, welcome back.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I graduated my undergrad from UW in HCDE in 2020 and also minored in dance. I first learned about HCDE through a Women in STEM camp at UW in high school, and then was able to apply and get into UW. And then after graduation, I started working as a UX designer at Disney.
Oh, I love that story. And I did not know that you were a dancer. What an interesting combination of UX and dance.
Yeah, it was like 2 HCDE classes and 1 dance class a quarter, which was really fun.
That's a cool story. And it helps probably when you're dancing in a parade at Disney, right?
Yeah, my team jokes about that every now and then, but one day maybe.
That was my joke. Okay. Anyway, all right, thanks for coming. I wanted to tell you all a quick story about a friend of mine, a friend of a family, and he just graduated with a computer science degree from another university, a university in Ohio. And he had a job offer from Zoom and a job offer from Meta. And he was talking to me and my husband's in HR, and he was talking to both of us about how to sort of leverage one off the other. And he had the offer from Zoom first, and basically we advised him to, but he.
Sorry, Melissa, you're muted.
You
I
muted
accidentally
yourself.
muted you.
Oh, okay. Anyway, this person, he really wanted to go to Meta. So what we advised him to do was tell the truth to Zoom and say, okay, Zoom, see what you can, can you raise this? Can you increase, can you increase the salary by this much, or can you give me this many shares? And what ended up happening was Zoom ended up giving him an additional $10,000 in like moving fees. And he would have never known if he didn't ask. So it's kind of a fun story. I hope that today's panelists can sort of help you with figuring out how to negotiate. Anyway, so let me go to Karen first, and let me ask you, Karen, can you talk about what your idea of the role of a recruiter versus a hiring manager is in sending out the offer? Like, where do the students get the offer from? How does that happen?
Absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. It's a great question. So view your recruiter as your mentor. You're somebody that is going to help you navigate through the interview process. Typically, that's how WISE recruiters are, is that we are here to be able to help people who are interested in WISE in navigating through the interview process as well as the offer process. And we always like to be as transparent as possible by talking about what all of our offers include, and also talking through what the candidate is looking for. The manager is really there to be able to help with answering any questions that you have, as well as on the WISE side to be able to assess whether or not this person has the right experience and skill set and aptitude to be able to join the team. So I always love building relationships. Most recruiters enjoy building relationships with the candidates that we engage with, so that way we can help you be able to see if WISE is the best option. And there are many times when candidates will share with me that they have multiple offers and they're very open to talking through all of the offers. And sometimes WISE isn't the number one option, and sometimes WISE is the number one and we'll talk through that. So most recruiters are going to be really open about having that conversation with you and also understanding where the company is flexible and being able to talk through the offers. So at any time, if you have any questions, please do let me know if you want to drill down deeper on what that means.
Can I ask a question, Karen, a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So the offer comes from you, the recruiter.
Yes.
Is that right?
So, correct. So the recruiter isn't the one that formulates what that offer is. We actually partner with our senior HR business partners. So once we get the leveling and basically once the candidate completes the final interview, I should say, we go through a debrief and the manager provides the leveling, and then the recruiter sends in all of that information to the senior HR business partner. And our HR team, they're the ones that subscribe to a third-party company to be able to help identify companies that are in the similar size, similar levels, to be able to, put together what that base compensation is going to look like for that role. So most companies have a couple different, so basically there's a base, there's an annual performance bonus, and there's some equity. And then some other companies might offer other details, but that's typically what WISE's offer package looks like.
Got it. Okay, thanks. I'm just going to go off script for a second and ask Jamie a quick question. Jamie, when you were offered the job at Disney, were you, did that come from the recruiter or from the hiring manager?
It was at the Gracehopper Celebration, so I believe it came from the recruiter, like mid-interview. So whoever was interviewing me, the final round.
Okay, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to your story because it's an interesting one. All right, sorry to go off script. Gail, can I ask you, what are some of the typical questions that you get from students about the whole negotiating process, about the whole getting the offer process?
Yeah, the biggest question is, can I ask for more money? And I think that's a legitimate question. I think every student should know their market value. Everybody should do their homework to figure out what the average going rate is for a comparable role in a comparable company, right? My Microsoft, a software engineer, for example, at Microsoft is certainly not going to make the same as a software engineer at Boeing. So thinking about how we're comparing apples to apples, first and foremost, everything's generally on the table, but you have to ask. And so when students go in with the assumption that, oh gosh, I hear internship salaries aren't as negotiable as full-time offers, I think that's a misnomer that students believe. But again, we put that in the hands of the recruiter and the company to determine if they feel that they've done the work, if they've done the homework to put the right things in the calculation to come up with that base pay. As Karen mentioned, it would be weird to have people with similar backgrounds and education make very differing amounts of money. And that's not great PR for a company. And so they do a lot of, I used to work at Boeing as a recruiter. We do every 6 months, we go through that calculator and we adjust for market value, we adjust for cost of living. And there's a lot of things that go into the calculator. And so, again, the biggest questions come down to, is it negotiable? What things can I ask for? Karen gave a really great list of some of the things that are normally on there: relocation, signing bonuses, additional vacation days, right? There's a lot of different things that are part of a total compensation package, not just base salary. And so we can help students negotiate, the different levers that can be pulled based on the company that they're going into. And thanks to the historic data that we've collected from senior survey data.
That's a cool idea to ask for more vacation days. I mean, you might value, more vacation days over the money. So that's neat. Jamie, now I'm going to go back to you. Can you talk to us about your own process, like maybe from the time that you were finishing your time at HCDE? Just tell us more about you and how you got to Disney and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so for the women on the call, if anyone hasn't heard about the Gracehopper Celebration yet, I highly recommend looking into it. It's in October every year, and I think it's hybrid, virtual, in person. But I was lucky, I was hired pre-COVID, so I was representing the CS department at UW, but they flew us to Orlando, Florida, and Gracehopper Celebration is this huge celebration of females in technology, and there's a bunch of speakers, and there's also a huge recruiting event of 500 tech companies. So great opportunity to get in your foot in the door for internships and full-time opportunities. But I was lucky to kind of glance around and start interviewing with a couple different companies, and really liked Disney, which was exciting. Had done a couple interviews before Gracehopper, and then at Gracehopper, our year it was in Orlando. So they took 250 women to Disney World for part of the recruiting event, which was really awesome. So I got to go on the Star Wars ride with the Imagineers that had built it. And we got to like learn all these fun facts, and it was still technically like recruiting, but very fun, which was awesome. And then we went to Disney World one night, and then the next morning, I woke up and at like a 9 had a final round, and that was kind of more of like a portfolio review and more like technical questions and design challenges, and then received my offer. My friends and I ended up going to Disneyland again because Gracehopper Celebration had ended. So I got my phone call with the offer at Epcot, which was really fun, like on the bus on my way to Epcot, which was really cool. But yeah, I got my offer the last day of Gracehopper. So that was that Friday. And then 2 weeks from then, I was interviewing with, so Disney owns a bunch of different companies or smaller brands. So like I was flown to ESPN to interview, not to interview, but to get to know the ESPN team and potentially live in Bristol, Connecticut. Because my job, when you're choosing a job, you can also sometimes choose location. So it was either Los Angeles, New York, or Bristol, Connecticut, where ESPN was. So I got to know the UX team for ESPN, got to go to Connecticut, went to Sports Center, it was super fun. And then also went to Los Angeles and got to meet the team that I ended up going with, and kind of get to know the Disney studio a lot. We got to walk by the trailers where they had like done filming. The Little Mermaid live had just happened, which was really fun. But like I got to know my manager, who was then my manager when I started at Disney. And then I think a month from then I signed my offer, and then COVID happened March 2020, so like almost 2 years ago, and I started remote after graduating remotely August 2020.
That's a fun story. Did you, and feel free to, you don't have to answer this if you want, but did you negotiate? Is there anything, were there any variables in the offer that you said, oh, okay, I want more of this or that or anything? And if
Yeah,
you didn't, like, do you regret it? Like, do you wish you had, is there anything you could have done differently?
So I would say for confidentiality's sake, I'm speaking as a representative of an HCDE alumni, not necessarily Disney, but regardless of the outcome, my mentors had empowered me to get into the practice of negotiating regardless of the outcome, especially entry level. It's a really good practice to start having. So regardless of how it ends up, it's a good thing to practice, I think is what.
It's really cool advice. Get into the practice of negotiating. Huh. Gail or Karen, can you weigh in on that? Do you have any thoughts about that? So you're just saying, Jamie, it's like you're practicing anything, any skill that you want to improve on, like tennis or chess or whatever, right?
Yeah, and then if anyone on this call ends up going to Gracehopper Celebration, there's some great seminars on it, especially as like women in tech. Yeah, and there's great resources out there to get in the habit and the practice, but it's definitely really a scary thing, but it doesn't have to be. But regardless of the outcome, it's like a good practice to do.
Gail or Karen, any comments about that?
I think for a lot of people, it's uncomfortable, but I agree with Jamie. It's really important to be able to voice and ask, because the worst thing that someone can say is no, and that's okay. And so definitely getting in the practice of asking and, having that conversation. I think even if the outcome, for example, if it's no, you can't have, or we're not able to be flexible, but maybe the conversation leads to, but this is what a review cycle looks like, and having the company be able to talk through what the review cycle looks like, to be able to understand what annual performance reviews look like and what performance bonuses look like, and so on and so forth. And the other way of the outcome is that they will be able to give you a little bit more. And I think being flexible is important in the negotiating process.
Thanks. Gail?
I'll be a little bit of a negative Nancy here. I think it's important to have the data to be able to ask for negotiation. A lot of companies will come in with their best and final. I think being a former recruiter and being on the receiving end of, hey, I saw your offer and I'd like to get X dollars more because of these things. I think it is important. And one of the things that we tout in the office is to make sure that you ask if it's negotiable, because the last thing we want students to do is to go in and put their best foot forward and then have this perception that they're disappointed. Although I agree that it's worth the practice of potentially not getting what you want and ask and being shot down a little bit. I think it is also important for us to be somewhat professional about it. And we're not just negotiating to negotiate. And that's one of the biggest things when it comes to offer evaluation is to, again, come in doing your homework, know your market value, and then figure out if there's playing room. Because a lot of times when we talk about negotiations, it is company makes first offer, candidate makes counter offer, company makes best and final. We're not going back and forth for 7 days trying to figure out, because at the end of the day, Karen's waiting for my answer so that she can tell 3 other candidates best of luck to you, right? And so again, this is not a long drawn out process. This is pretty quick and painless if we make it. But I think, again, we still have to be professional in the way that we ask. And it's not a demand, it is an ask.
Great advice. Yeah, great advice. Let's see, I wanted to ask Karen, once you make an offer, well, it's kind of building on what Gail just said. Like once you make an offer, typically, does the person say, okay, let me get back to you? Or like what really happens behind the scenes? Like the back and forth.
When WISE recruiters engage with candidates during the interview process, we always like to, in the journey, we like to understand what their expectations are, because I think that is really important to hear and understand. So that way, if the expectations are outside of maybe what the scope is, because for example, at WISE, we're in the process of building out our leveling and our compensation based on that leveling. So many times candidates will ask, well, what is your budget for this role? And for us, we currently work a little bit backwards where we have to submit everything through HR and then they give us the offer. But we have gone through enough offers to know whether or not it's out of scope. And so if a candidate gives us their compensation expectations, we'll ask them how flexible they are, because I think it's important to know that you're flexible, right? And be able to have that conversation early on. And to answer your question, when our process to be able to get the offer is pretty streamlined. So when a candidate completes their final interview, then the recruiter works with the manager to be able to call a debrief, interview debrief, to call everybody that was part of that interview process together to talk about what the results were. And then the manager and the recruiter will then discuss leveling. Once everything is successful and everything is great, we look at leveling and look at if that person raises the bar and what mentorship looks like and growth and opportunity. And then we send that over to our HR team, and our HR team then will send a request over to our business leaders, so our finance team, to get approval for compensation. And then once everything's been approved, it goes back to the recruiter to be able to extend the offer. And typically what we like to do is also make sure that the managers feel that the offer aligns with the leveling that on their team and everything like that. So we usually just make note to have the managers included, so that way they know what their team's offers are. And then when we extend the offer, when the recruiter extends the offer to the candidate, we talk through the offer. We talk through all the, the base compensation, the bonus, and the equity, what that looks like, and also talk about whether or not they have other offers on the table, and want to understand kind of where that candidate's head is at as far as where WISE is on their level of like, if they're interviewing with, let's pretend, 5 companies and 3 of them are extending offers, where is WISE on that? Are we at the top? Are we in the middle? Are we at the end? So that way we can have an idea of, whether or not we need to maybe have conversations where, if we are at the top, okay, let's try and, get this person to join WISE because we're at the top, and what that looks like and what that conversation looks like. And if we're not, then we need to make a decision of, okay, well, maybe if the candidate's not interested in WISE, then we need to close out on that opportunity so we can make the offer to the next person so they're not waiting a long time. It's kind of going off of what Gail had said earlier. So that's what it looks like. Hopefully that helps.
That does help. Can you clarify? You keep using the word level. Can you kind of help me understand what that means?
Sure, absolutely. So at WISE, we have levels 1 through 6. So new college grads typically, for example, for a UX designer, would come in as a UX designer level 1. And UX level 2 would be somebody typically that has, it's a balance, right, between experience and also what your what you have in your, let's just pretend somebody is a new college grad, but if they have a lot of internship experience and if they have some work experience before, maybe they're not a UX designer level 1, maybe they're a UX designer level 2. So based on that is during the interview process and also the presentation of their portfolio will determine what level they are.
Got it. Okay, that helps.
Yeah.
Gail, can I ask you about do you have any like stories from the field, like stories about negotiating, like things that students did or didn't do that helped them or maybe hurt them? Or you could talk about your experience when you were a recruiter at Boeing as well. I'm sorry to catch you off guard on this.
No, this is off script. No, I think there's always this fear. There's always a fear that someone's going to take away my offer if I counter. So I normally hear that, and to be fair, I will say that's generally more of a female candidate who's saying that. It's like, ooh, I don't want to really negotiate. I don't want to push my limits. They've already taken me, and so things like going to Gracehopper and SWE and some of those big conferences where you can feel empowered by the people that you're with to take a stand. I think that's probably the biggest thing that we see. I see a lot of students who don't counter offer or try to negotiate because they're afraid that the offer just gets taken away, and that's not normally the case. I did have one student at Boeing who negotiated so far off the scale that we did say, you know what, we're so far off, this negotiation's never going to happen. We're never going to meet in the middle, and we'll just, like Karen said, we'll just move on to the next candidate and go forth. And I think that's one reason why in the application process, they ask for your range. They want to know if they're in the ballpark, because if you're not in the ballpark and you're expecting a much higher salary than they can give, then they'll just move to the next candidate. We also don't want you to lowball yourself. And should you ask for the lowball, right? So let's say I go in and say my expected salary range is 70 to 80, and Karen tells me, oh, well, I was going to offer her 90, but she only asked for 70, so I'm only going to give her that. That's not how that works either. So I think there's a lot of misnomers when it comes to just the power that negotiation has. But the best stories are the people that ask, right? And sometimes the recruiters, no recruiter wants to see you stumble, right? If their candidate is a good fit, they'll do their darndest to bring them in. I mean, we got paid bonuses for people that we were able to bring in and could retain, right? It's a numbers game. It's a retention game for us as recruiters. And so being able to find the right fit and keep that person is priority one when you think about the long-term success of a company. And so I think, again, where a lot of the horror stories happen is, oh, shoot, I heard that so-and-so got this money and I didn't. But I will tell you, in the 7 years that I have been in this job, every single one student who I have talked through a counteroffer and has asked has gotten something. Very rarely do I hear the story of someone who's not. But again, I tell them to go in and do their homework, right? Have your bullet points, understand your value, understand the things that they may not have taken into account. How are you more valuable than the other candidate? But I have very rarely seen anybody, not get something out of it. And very rarely have I seen anybody have an offer pulled because they've been brave enough to ask.
That's helpful, Gail. Thanks. Somewhere, and I distributed this on Tuesday Tips somewhere a while ago. I have to dig it up. But there is some crowdsourced document, and I've shared this. I think I've shared this maybe with Gail and Karen. There's a crowdsourced document about salary ranges for like using Karen's terminology, level 1 UX designers, level 2 researchers, et cetera. And it's for the whole tech industry. And I should find that again. Maybe during the Q&A. Anyway, let's see. Now I want to just transition to a subject that I've discussed with Gail and Karen many times, is reneging on an offer. Like what happens when you have accepted an offer, but a better one comes along. And I wanted to ask Karen, how do you feel as a recruiter when that happens? And then I wanted to ask Gail, how do you feel as a representative of the school when that happens?
I
Thanks.
think time.
Kathleen just put that document in the chat. Thanks, Kathleen. I think that was it. Yeah. Okay. Karen, how do you feel when that happens?
You know, I think that there's a few different schools of thought. And I think that in the past, it's something that maybe would be seen as unprofessional because you've already made a commitment, right? And so if you've already made a commitment, then people want to see that that commitment is followed through with. But I think with why I have that in there is because times have changed a little bit. And, because times have changed, I think companies need to be a little bit more flexible and being able to better understand and listen and hear, what are the other offers? What does that look like? And have that conversation and be open. And I think the biggest takeaway from anything is be flexible. If you love a company and you have received another offer, talk to your recruiter and find out what are the options. And that recruiter should then, have that open conversation with you and be able to take everything in and see what they can do for you. And sometimes they might not be able to do something for you, but sometimes they can. And what does that mean for you? Because I think that an offer isn't always an offer across the board. I think there's big companies, startups, and those offers look different. And what you also need to consider too is, what does that opportunity look like? What kind of impact are you going to make? Who are you going to be working with? And those are all the different components that really need to be considered. But to answer your question, Melissa, I think that in the past it looked different, and today, have that conversation and see what they can do. And then in your mind, ultimately, you're the one that is making that decision. And you need to figure out if the opportunity that you already made a commitment to is something that you want to follow through with, or, is this other opportunity more important to you because it offers another dynamic? Is it about the money, or is it about the opportunity? And ultimately, that is a decision. We have yet to experience, knocking on wood, a candidate rescinding their offer. However, I have had people that have shared they have, decided to, rescind in the offer in the way that, something personal came up, right? It doesn't happen often, but it has. And so I'm sure with how the market is going, that there's going to be more and more, either, I know in the recruiting world, we call it ghosting, people that don't show up. That didn't happen a while ago, but now, I think over the last 10 years, you hear about that sometimes. People ghost their recruiters, and vice versa, where I've heard recruiters ghosting candidates as well. And, we don't want ghosting. I think that ghosting it makes it tough, but just be honest and have those conversations and explore.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and then Jamie, I'm going to come to you because I have an important question to you when Gail's done. All right, so Gail, what is your advice to students about reneging on an offer, and how does the university feel about it?
I'm gonna have PTSD here in a second. So you're all adults. You're all going to make decisions. The best I can do is provide you as good engineers with the data that makes the most sense, and you can make the decision on your own. From the University of Washington standpoint, obviously a commitment is a commitment, right? When you sign and you fingerprint and you get your paperwork in and you sign on the dotted line, remember, you're not the only part of the process, right? So again, Karen's interviewed 4 people. You say yes, she's turned away 3 others because she believes her top candidate is accepted, What then happens is you come back sometime later, a week, a month, 4 months, whatever that looks like, and say, you know what, sorry, I can't. And for whatever reason, right? But now Karen's in a tough spot, and I'm going to use Karen because she's the company recruiter. Now Karen's in a tough spot because she had a position filled, which she has shut off all applications for and all processes for. She hasn't done any interviews, right? She thought you were coming in. I mean, she's got to start that process all over again. And, you know, if you accepted an offer in November and then come April, you've reneged and said, you know what, I'm not coming. Yeah, that's not the best talent's not available in April anymore, right? Everybody's gotten their jobs and everybody's kind of moved on their merry way. And so puts us in a little bit of a pickle from a professionalism standpoint, right? And again, regardless of reason, that doesn't look well upon you as a candidate, doesn't look well upon us as the university. The one renege generally comes back to our office, and Karen will call me and say, hey, you know what, Gail, so Jamie reneged on her offer. I don't need you to do anything about that, but I thought you should know. There have been more harsh words than that from many recruiters who have said we should do something punitive to that student, and we've taken the stance not to do that, right? I'll meet with students who go through that process and are identified as somebody who's reneged, and I'll have a conversation with them and I'll give them their life lesson, and they'll go on their merry way and make their own decision. But again, I think there are short-term, I'll say, repercussions. And to be honest, we don't know where recruiters go next. Recruiting is a very small community, right? And my Microsoft recruiter is now at Amazon. My Boeing recruiter is now at Blue Origin. So that community stays pretty close. And so thinking about potential, I'll say, I won't say blacklist, but the potential image issues that you may have if Karen remembers, oh, I remember Jamie, she's that girl that reneged on me back at Wise. That has potential implications down the road. And so again, you're all big people, you all put your pants on one leg at a time. Nobody dies in their first job either. And so thinking about, you know, to Karen's point, do what's right for you, but make sure that you understand kind of the consequences and how it affects other people in the process along the way.
Thanks, Gail and Karen. That's always a touchy, difficult situation. And Kathleen added that other HCDE students might be interviewing for that same job. So they didn't get it because you accepted. Anyway, I'd like to, in talking to Jamie, Jamie had some fabulous advice about what to do in the time between, like, you get the offer and then, you know, the job doesn't start for another 6 months or whatever. And so I just wanted to throw this at Jamie, if you don't mind. Like, do you have any advice for students about how to prepare for that first day?
Yeah, definitely. This is some of the advice that I gave to, I'm one of the mentors in the HCDE mentorship program. I see a couple of you guys in the audience, so hi. But some advice that I got from my fabulous mentor, Tracy, when I was an undergrad was ask for your job description once you sign the offer and take each bullet point and make sure, put them into like 3 buckets of know well, know kind of well, and need to know better. And the ones that you need to know better, focus your time on that before you start, just to set yourself up for success. So like, for example, when I started at Disney, we were very sketch based. Now we're more Figma based, but I had learned how to design in Figma. So I spent the next 6 months learning Sketch. So then when I started on day 1, I had myself a little bit better time getting used to it instead of just having to relearn the software and relearn a new job all on the same day. And then also my mentor had recommended getting your level and then the level above and taking a look at the skills required for the job above your current level, seeing what goals you want to make with that, and then try to see what areas you currently fall short. So where that be like visual design, motion design, UX, design systems, that kind of thing. Then you can go and start on your first day. I started at Disney with a list of goals and showed them to my manager, like just like 5 goals that I had for starting my role. And those were kind of based off of it, which was great because then I could start working toward achieving those goals immediately when I was starting at Disney. And then additionally, I would definitely recommend asking for a mentor immediately when you get there, just to have like most onboarding processes, like with a tech company, you'll have one, but if not, like request one, because then if you have any like questions about the team or anything like that, you can ask them before you start, or within your first week, if you don't understand a concept or something, you have like your direct person other than your manager to speak to about that. And then last piece of advice would be, if you have the opportunity to meet with your manager before, definitely do so. I felt a lot less nervous about starting my new role because I had flown to Connecticut and met the whole East Coast team, and then flown to Los Angeles and met the whole West Coast team. So there were a lot of people kind of rooting for me when I started, instead of it all being like first day of school, new student energy. But yeah.
I love that, Jamie. And I love how you're kind of recommending, well, you are recommending that they reverse engineer the goals, reverse engineer the job description, even from the next level up, which is pretty cool. I think I've asked all the questions that, well, I think I want to go to Q&A, if you don't mind. And there's several, but I'm just going to, let's see, I'll ask this question real quick. Let's see. Would you have any tips on negotiating job start dates, especially for internships? If there are multiple offers, can we try to negotiate to push for a summer internship? Can we try to negotiate to push a summer internship into fall internship? How would we start that conversation and prepare for that conversation? Let's see. I don't know. I think that's maybe a question. Who wants to answer that one? Maybe Karen, do you want to answer that? Want to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we haven't had a whole lot of internships on the design side, but we have had quite a few internships on the engineering side. And this is something that we get constantly, which is negotiating start dates and times. And so definitely, it's okay. I think it's definitely okay to, share that, when your availability is, and have your recruiter, work with the managers and finding out, what flexibility the company has. I know some companies aren't flexible, but at Wise, our internships are non-traditional, meaning that we don't just have internships during the summer. We have internships that, are throughout the year. And so definitely find out what the company's internship schedule looks like and how flexible they are. So it's definitely something worth visiting. And if you already are committed to another internship, it's definitely not unheard of to see if you can, if they can provide you an offer for the next internship or when that's going to be.
Okay, good advice. Gail, is there anything to add to that? If there's multiple offers, how to negotiate is there anything to add? Feel free to say no.
The only thing I would say is make sure you ask both sides, right? For an extension, a move of the date. I think it's a one and done, right? The earlier you ask in the process, the better. Just like if you think about an extension on your assignment, if you know that you've got a bunch of stuff due in week 6, right? Maybe you ask in week 2, hey, looks like I might be really busy in there. I might want to ask for that. More likely your professor is a little more forgiving at that point, going and say, that's cool. But if you're asking the day before an assignment's due for more time, that looks a little shady. So I think just being conscious of that timing is important, and you're going to get one extension and that's it. So use it wisely. We're not, again, going back to, there are other candidates who are waiting for an answer. So we're not, hey, can I have a week? Oh, just kidding. Can I have another week? No, now can I have 2 weeks, right? Make it a one and done.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to go back up to a question from Danielle, who's currently in the middle of choosing an offer for an internship. And Danielle would love to know some real life examples or scenarios of how to leverage one offer over the other one, or even some tips to bear in mind during the specific negotiation process. I wonder if we've already covered these, leveraging one offer over another. I think is there anything else to add to this, panelists? I feel like we've talked about this. This is a question from a while ago, so. Yeah, I feel like we've talked about leveraging one, just being honest, and Karen gave some great advice on that. Are there any other questions? Anybody want to speak up, or does anybody want to just put some questions in the chat? There was another one I saw earlier. Anybody want to talk? I'll ask another question that somebody asked. Is it true that all entry-level candidates should be paid equally and start at the same base salary? Karen, what do you think of that?
No, I think that especially in human-centered design engineering, I feel like everyone has a different, like, depending upon how many internships you have had, really speak to somebody's ability to be able to put together what their portfolio is going to look like, right? So I think that in some cases, maybe, but if you've got experience and you have internship experience and you have, experience from before you entered into the program, I think all of that counts. And so, it's not unheard of for somebody that is newly college grad, but you have a different level of experience than someone else. So I definitely think the experience that you have should be accounted for.
Or a master's student, grad
Right.
student. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, VJ. Yeah, you're welcome, VJ. Okay, so these are any other questions? We're like 15 minutes early. We went through everything so quickly. Does anybody have any questions? Jamie, you're not representing Disney, but I feel like your knowledge and your mentorship is so amazing and so valuable. So I just wanted to encourage the students to ask you questions, if there are any, about your journey to Disney, because it's pretty cool. Oh wait, somebody did ask. Somebody says, how do you negotiate going back to school after working for a certain amount of years? You mean when, Alita, do you mean when you haven't been working for a couple of years because you've been in school? I think that's what you mean. Is that what you mean? I think that's what you mean. Any other, maybe I'll ask Gail, if you've been in school, when you are working and you want to go back to school. Oh, that's an interesting question. That's a question.
So I think, again, it comes down to experience, right? Not everybody's going to have the same base salary because not everybody's going to have the same experience. And so as somebody who is coming in to, well, let me back up a sec. So most entry-level positions, at least as I have seen them, generally require 0 to 3, maybe 5 years of experience. Right? So that swath is pretty wide to be considered entry-level. And so the student who's a bachelor's student with 3 years of work experience could generally be comparable to a master's with a year of work experience, to maybe somebody with just 3 straight years, of experience who goes back and gets a master's degree. And so that's part of the equation. That's part of the calculator that recruiters use. I certainly think that being able to negotiate part of your salary or your total compensation package, one of the bullet points that you could use is, yes, I do have professional in-house real world experience above and beyond maybe somebody who went straight through school. So that's part of the bargaining. That's part of the negotiation, I'll say, counteroffer process. But the process looks the same, whether you be a bachelor's student, a master's student, a PhD student, or somebody who's still in industry.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. I have a question. There are a lot of students who missed the question about Gracehopper. It wasn't really a question, it was more than Jamie's statement. Jamie, can you talk just a second about Gracehopper and how it helped you and what you recommend for our female students who are listening?
Yeah, definitely. So I went to the Gracehopper Celebration back in 2019. This year, I believe it's hybrid, remote, and also in person. But there's great speakers and hiring as well as speakers. But the year that I went, it was the first year that they had a human computer interaction track, or a like UX track. So they began hiring for UX designers there. But it was a great opportunity just like to learn beyond what I learned in HCDE, get to meet. I met a bunch of amazing women, like beyond just recruiting, like that I've kept in touch with, who had similar interests to me in like the UX field. And then also it's a hiring expo of 500 tech companies. So pretty much every major technology company is in attendance, and they all have events after. If you're interviewing with them, they have events like after the conference, which is really fun. So it's like each one tries to be like the most fun event, which is exciting. But yeah, it was a great opportunity to get my foot in the door, like interacting with different companies, because the first interaction you had with the company, unless they found you in the database, Disney, for example, had found me in the database, but other companies, it's like the first interaction is you with your resume, like talking face to face with the recruiter, and then that's how you get through the interview cycle. But yeah, it was a great opportunity. I actually recruited for Disney this past year at Gracehopper, which was really exciting. I saw a lot of HCDE faces, which is great. But yeah, even as someone beyond just entry level or beyond just a student and now as an entry level, like it was a great opportunity just to like fine tune those skills and get to know more awesome women in the UX community.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really cool for our female identifying students. Gail, about Gracehopper, does the College of Engineering put out information about the Gracehopper, or how can students learn more?
Yeah, so we don't necessarily put out information about Gracehopper. It is a national conference. I know that for the Allen School students, there's actually a large constituency of CS students that go. The department actually also sponsors registration fees for some of those students, very similar to the Society of Women Engineers Conference. We've had a number of departments pay for students' registration to go to that as part of a professional development. All they have to do is ask their department. I think it was, I don't know who it was, but somebody did ask, if there's a getting ready for Gracehopper. Right?
Oh yeah,
I think that'd be a really great workshop to run, because I think, again, the opportunities that are there that Jamie mentioned, and there are others as well. I think, but particularly the career fair piece, I think in one single shot in one big room to be able to take care of all those interviews and all of those details in a short period of time, I think is an awesome opportunity for students to take part of. But I did put in the date, so it is a little bit weird. It is before school started. It's getting earlier and earlier. When I started UW, it was in October. This last year, it was the 4 days before school started, and now it is the full week before school starts. So take a look at calendars and see if you can get a ticket. Tickets go fast. So it's a space limited, hybrid, virtual, in-person, career fair only, all those things. So if you haven't already taken a look at the website, I encourage you to do so.
Yeah, and then when I attended, I was sponsored by the Allen School, and the following year, a couple women who I had mentored had reached out asking about Gracehopper, and I believe some of them were funded when they reached out. And then I believe the year after that, there was a little bit more funding. So I'm not sure what our department or what the HCDE department has in terms of like full ride funding or funding, but definitely don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Kathleen had to go, but I would have asked her because she would be the one to know this kind of stuff. I haven't heard her talk about it in a couple of years. But anyway, thank you for that interesting information about Gracehopper. And then Aaron asked, what are your thoughts on negotiating a raise if your contract is being extended? So in other words, you're a student, you're on a contract role, and they want to extend it. And they want you to extend it, or you both choose to extend it. So how do you negotiate a raise? Oh, here we go, extension. Yeah. In the face of somebody says, yeah, sorry, the questions are coming too fast. Anyway, anyway, any thoughts about negotiation? Maybe that's a question for Karen, maybe? Do you hire contract?
I have hired contractors in the past. And so I definitely think that in the past, typically when contracts get renewed, the compensation doesn't change. But right now, times are a little bit different. And so it never hurts to ask.
Yeah. And back to Sarah's question about, another company poaching you, offering you a better deal. It seems like it's just ask politely, right? Back to what Gail said earlier. And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it definitely, companies are going to be poaching everybody these days. I think it's a matter of having that relationship with the company that you're with, because you already have the relationship. You already started working on designs and working with product managers, and definitely give them the opportunity to do something about that counter, right?
Okay, thanks. Somebody says, is UX design or research usually a tech or non-tech role? Are there any implications for tech versus non-tech roles? I'm going to throw that to Gail.
My answer would probably be it depends, right? This is the same reason that people ask, is computer science an engineering degree or not, when most people as they graduate, enter a software engineer 1 role. I guess from a definition of tech versus non-tech, I mean, I don't know I don't know how that makes a difference. I mean, some engineers, it requires you to be ABET accredited. But in this case, HCDE is not. So does a company consider that non-tech, but the work is tech? And so I think that's up to each company to answer. For the most part, I would say UX design and research is a very tech role. Many of the companies that come to me for those roles are tech-based, and have very technical questions as part of the interview process. So I'll lean that way and stick to my answer because it's recorded.
That's what I see too. Karen, I see you're nodding your head. Your UX folks are in your tech category, right?
Correct. Yep. That wise, our UX,
or they're not in sales, or okay.
We do have UX designers that are aligned with our marketing team, our A&R team, but they're still considered tech roles.
Okay, thank you. Gosh, okay, we're 6 minutes early. Anybody? We have a great opportunity to ask these panelists questions. Otherwise, I'll just say thank you. And it was great. It was great seeing you all. We had lots of people show up and we're grateful. I'm going to stop the recording, I think. Stop the recording.